They laughed when he stood up, a teenager in worn shoes, barely 17, claiming to be a lawyer in a courtroom full of seasoned men in tailored suits. But he didn't flinch. He had a case, a client, and something more dangerous than all their degrees. Proof. This isn't just a story about law. It's about a system forced to listen to the one voice it never expected to hear. And it starts on a rainy morning in Detroit. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of downtown Detroit. The streets glistened under a pale, gray morning. Yellow taxis idled along the curb in front of the Wayne County Circuit Court. The sidewalk bustled with well-dressed attorneys in tailored coats, leather briefcases swinging at their sides, heels clacking up the courthouse steps. The world here moved fast and cold. And then a different sound. A slow, deliberate step. A worn sole slapped the wet pavement. Out of rhythm, out of place. A pair of frayed dress shoes, soles thinning, black slacks that no longer held a crease. The camera panned upward. A young black teenager, 17 at most, face calm, back straight. He carried a black leather case like it weighed everything. His name was Imani Wallace. Inside the lobby, heads turned. A few lawyers whispered without even trying to hide their sneers. Did janitorial services change uniforms? Who let the intern wear a tie? Imani said nothing. He walked through it, through the stares, the judgment, the room's cold breath. His fingers clenched around the strap of his case, but his eyes never dropped. They stayed level, focused. Toward the back of the courtroom, Evelyn Carter watched, an elderly black woman in a wool coat too thin for the weather. She sat small and quiet, hands folded around a faded cloth bag, but her eyes locked on Imani with something rare in that room. Trust. A trembling hope. Then, the doors opened. The judge entered. Randall Whitmore, white, 60, hair silvered and neatly combed, robe pressed and crisp. He walked like a man who'd never once been questioned in his life. He took his seat and tapped his gavel once. Court is now in session. Case of Carter v. Green Ridge Development. Counsel for the plaintiff, step forward. A silence. Then the tap of shoes again, Imani stepping up. The courtroom seemed to stiffen. He stopped at the center podium, unclasped his case, and spoke, his voice cutting through the marble stillness. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Imani Wallace. I represent Mrs. Evelyn Carter. The room inhaled as one. A woman near the back half chuckled. The judge blinked slowly, then leaned forward with a smirk that bordered on insult. You're who? The plaintiff's intern, assistant, drama club captain? I am her legal representative, Imani replied, unmoved. Whitmore raised a brow. You believe this is a mock trial, a school project perhaps? The sarcasm dripped down each word. That's when Evelyn Carter rose. Her voice was soft but firm, each syllable shaped by both age and fire. He's my lawyer, Your Honor, the only one who listened. The room fell into a second silence, but this time, something shifted. Whitmore's lips tightened. He cleared his throat. Very well, let's see his credentials. Until then, quiet, everyone. The spectators didn't speak, but their posture had changed. Eyes that once dismissed now lingered longer. Some tilted their heads. Others, ever so slightly, frowned. Not at Imani, but at themselves. A boy had just walked into the wolves' den, and somehow, they'd all flinched first. The streetlights flickered above the crumbling pavement of East Side Detroit. The clock read 4:07 a.m. Tanya Wallace tied her scarf in the hallway mirror, her hoodie sleeve torn near the shoulder. She didn't look at herself, just at the boy still asleep on the couch. Today I'll try to bring home some milk, baby, she whispered. Outside, the wind blew sharp. Inside, Imani, 8 years old, sat alone, a slice of dry bread in one hand, a tattered book in the other. His glasses were crooked, held together by a strip of Scotch tape. The only sound came from the neighbor's TV bleeding through the wall. The first black judge appointed in Michigan. He turned the page slowly. Years passed in silence. Imani at the school dumpster, digging through a pile of discarded SAT prep books. Tonya, back late from cleaning houses, would still ask, "What'd you read today?" Her eyes always tired, never her spirit. At Jefferson Prep, a private academy miles from his world, Imani sat alone at lunch, eating leftover spaghetti from a reused butter container. One afternoon in the bathroom, two white students shoved him into the sink. "Wrong school, homie. Try across the freeway." Imani didn't fight. He dried his face, walked out, and returned to the library. One day, Mr. Calvin Brooks, his only black teacher, called him in. "I see you in the library every day," Brooks said. "You don't belong there with them. You're ahead of them." Then he leaned in. "They'll tell you that you don't belong, but law doesn't pick a skin color. It picks the ones who understand it." Imani never forgot. Back in the courtroom, the air had grown still again. Judge Whitmore's voice was sharp. "Let's see the credentials, Mr. Wallace." Imani stepped forward calmly, pulled out a sealed envelope from his briefcase. He placed it on the clerk's desk with the same precision one might set a chess piece down, not as a move, but a message. Whitmore opened it slowly. His brow creased. He read every page. Then again. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. "The credentials appear valid. Michigan Bar, verified, fine." A pause. "But I don't hand out sympathy points for youth. Show me what you've got." There was no applause, no gasp, just a subtle shift. The people in that courtroom had come to see a boy dismissed. Instead, they were starting to see a young man stand tall, and for the first time, they weren't so sure who belonged where. Imani stepped forward again, slow and steady, standing in the very spot where his age had just been questioned. The courtroom light framed his silhouette, slim, composed, immovable. "I didn't come here to ask for leniency," he began, his voice firm, unwavering. "I came to defend the truth." A hush spread like smoke. Even those who had smirked before were now watching, waiting. He clicked a remote. The first slide illuminated the courtroom screen. A scanned copy of the 1992 deed to the Carter property, complete with an official seal and signature. "This," Imani said, pointing to the document, "is the original title, acquired by Mrs. Carter's late husband, passed down legally, never contested, until now." Each slide that followed told a story: tax records, water bills, neighborhood affidavits. Imani's voice never wavered, each sentence a clean strike. The property was occupied continuously, legally, publicly, peacefully. With every citation, he glanced up at Judge Whitmore, not to seek approval, but to meet him eye to eye. Then came the disruption. Richard Hale stood, tailored suit, crimson tie, white hair groomed to perfection. He smiled as he walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he began, dripping condescension, "are we seriously discussing the legality of a multi-million-dollar asset based on the defense of someone who, respectfully, cannot even buy a beer?" Chuckles rippled through the back rows. Imani remained still, calm. He set his papers down, turned. "I may not be old enough to drink," he said, locking eyes with Hale, "but I was old enough to pass the bar. Something you didn't do at my age, sir." A collective breath caught in the room. He pivoted again, moving swiftly through the next slides. Satellite images showing the Carter family's residence since the early 90s. Property tax records consistent across decades. Hale tried to interject, but Imani raised a hand, graceful but assertive. "Let me finish." At the judge's bench, Whitmore leaned forward for the first time, elbows on the desk, chin on his fingers, his gaze fixed. Imani ended with quiet power. "I don't need you to believe me because I'm young. I just need you to look at the evidence." From the back row, Evelyn Carter's eyes began to shine. For the first time, hope flickered. A beat of silence. Then Imani stepped forward once more, measured and intentional. "Your Honor," he said, "I request permission to present two documents for side-by-side comparison." Whitmore's brow arched. "What sort of documents?" Imani's voice lowered but carried. "Two contracts of sale. One submitted by Greenridge, one we discovered independently. Both bearing the same name, but the signatures are far from identical." Lights dimmed slightly as the projector warmed. The screen came alive. 2 signatures, blown up in high resolution, displayed side by side. Imani approached the screen with a laser pointer in hand. His movements were slow, deliberate. This is the signature from 1997, signed by a man who, by medical record, lost fine motor control in his right hand 10 years prior. He traced the clean loops of the L. And this? He pointed to the 2023 version. Steady, firm, confident. His gaze swept the courtroom. You tell me. How does a paralyzed man improve his handwriting over time? No one laughed now. A stenographer gasped, pen slipping from her fingers. Imani turned back to the room. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. Whitmore sat perfectly still, his hands curled against the edge of the bench. The courtroom waited, every breath suspended. Suddenly Richard Hale leapt up. This is showmanship! Theater! He barked. From the gallery, a voice, an older woman, called out, firm and clear. Better that than faking documents. Scattered murmurs filled the room, some chuckling, others whispering. Not mockery this time. Acknowledgement. Whitmore banged the gavel once. Court will recess for 1 hour. I'll review all filings before ruling. Then his eyes met Imani's. Not condescending this time, but steady, equal. As the room emptied slowly, Evelyn Carter reached out, trembling, and took Imani's hand. Even if we lose, she said, voice cracking, you made them listen. Imani squeezed her hand gently. He said nothing, but when he turned toward the courtroom door, sunlight had broken through the clouds, and it was shining right on him. Judge Whitmore sat alone in the judicial chamber, door slightly ajar. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed above his head. Before him, a thick stack of documents. Imani Wallace's evidence sat opened, edges curled from use. He flipped through the pages slowly, not skimming, not rushing. This time, he was reading with something he hadn't felt in years. Clarity. The neon light carved sharp lines into his tired face. The stern mask he wore every day had begun to crack, revealing the weight of years spent holding a gavel higher than the truth. His hand paused on the forged contract. The ink, the signatures. He'd seen thousands like it, but never had one been so obvious, so brazen. He looked up. Across from him, framed photos of former chief judges lined the wall. Men he had once admired, men he now questioned. His own photo hung near the door, stern and polished. He studied it, like he didn't recognize himself. Somewhere, far in the distance, the tick of a wall clock grew louder. Then suddenly, silence. And a moment later, purpose. The doors to the courtroom swung open. Whitmore returned, robe flowing, eyes hard, voice sharper than ever. He slammed the gavel once. After reviewing all evidence presented, this court rules as follows. He looked directly at Imani, then scanned the room. Greenridge Development Corporation submitted falsified documentation in this case. Ownership of the disputed property remains with Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Case closed. The room exploded in applause. Raw, relieved, real. Evelyn Carter sobbed openly, hands over her chest, body trembling with years of injustice finally lifted. In the center of it all, Imani stood still. Eyes wet, but not a tear fell. Dignity held him steady, composed, unshaken. Across the aisle, Richard Hale gathered his papers, jaw clenched. No apology, no rebuttal, just a slow walk to the exit. No one met his gaze. As the noise faded, Whitmore descended the bench. He stopped just a step from Imani. You reminded me, he said, softly, of the man I used to be. The room didn't cheer again. It didn't need to. They were already listening. A television flickered inside a modest apartment on Detroit's east side. A news anchor spoke with restrained emotion. Today, a 17-year-old attorney shattered precedent, and perhaps perception itself. On screen, Imani in court, eyes fierce, voice ringing with purpose. On the floor, a young black boy watched in silence, a bowl of cereal forgotten in his lap. "I want to be like him," he whispered. Elsewhere, Tanya Wallace stood in a kitchen, still in her cleaning uniform, holding a dish towel. Her eyes shimmered as the screen glowed. Her son's name echoed from the TV. She smiled, quiet, proud, overwhelmed. Months passed. A red brick building on a battered block now bore a clean new sign: Justice for All Initiative, free legal aid and mentoring. Inside, Imani stood beside his mother and Mr. Brooks, the three of them, arms around each other, faces tired but lit from within. Children sat in folding chairs, listening as Imani spoke about civil rights and the Constitution, not like a lecture, but like a promise. A young girl raised her hand. "Mr. Wallace, do you think someone like me could do what you did?" He crouched to her level. "If you believe in yourself," he said, "the law has no choice but to believe in you too." Later, at the same courtroom where it all began, a special ceremony was held. Whitmore, dressed simply, addressed the crowd. "Justice doesn't wear a badge or come with an age. It comes from courage. And today, I'm proud to honor not just a lawyer, but a generation." He handed Imani a golden gavel. The applause shook the room. That evening, back where it all started, Imani stood on the corner of his old block. Trash still fluttered by the curb, but beside him, a new sign had been nailed into a telephone pole. Legal Aid Zone 1, powered by Imani Wallace. He turned to a group of kids playing basketball. "Raise the gavel into the air. Justice belongs to you," he called out, smiling. "If you've got the guts to hold on to it." The sun dipped low over Detroit. Laughter rang out. The camera panned back, wide, warm, full of light. Justice had come home. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in silence, through the courage to speak when no one's listening. This story reminds us that truth doesn't ask for permission, and real change begins where doubt used to live. If something here moved you, challenged you, or made you think, let us know. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak louder than power. Thanks for watching.